Welcome to Ecotopia U Media. I'm your host, Melissa McGinnis, joined by my co-host, Tom, right? Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
We have a fabulous guest with us today. Bob Hollis is joining us via Skype. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Good morning, Melissa. Tom, good to be with you.
Well, you have a beautiful background. Tell us where you're at.
Well, I live up in the mountains, about 10 miles south of Pollock Pines, 2 miles south of Mormon Immigrant Trail, about 35 miles as the crow flies southwest of Lake Tahoe.
Oh, wow. It's absolutely beautiful scenery. Thank you for joining us today. So tell us a little bit about how you know Tom.
Oh, yeah. How did our
Well, I
cross?
think... Sure. I serve on the board of the U.S. Zero Waste Business Council, and so I'd heard about a lot of the great work that Tom's doing for us with Whole Foods. And then I first met Tom at the Sierra Nevada Brewing Company when we went up there to do a training program on how to certify businesses for zero waste. And I'd heard his name, walked up and said hello, and then later we connected when he was looking for someone to help with the website. And I don't think he'd even realized at the time that I was the person he'd met up at Sierra Nevada and was on the board of USCWBC.
And so you do web work for a number of NGOs. Give us sort of the 2-3 top NGOs that you web work for.
Sure. Well, several right in your building, Tom, where your office is located in Sacramento. Just right there, I work with Keep California Beautiful. Work on a lot of projects with them, and also the California Product Stewardship Council. I do work with the National Recycling Coalition. I'm a former board member there and still provide their technical and web support. We just set up the election ballot this morning. And of course, the U.S. Zero Waste Business Council, and also work with Positive Legacy, Rock the Earth. I'm on their advisory boards and try to help out good people doing good work wherever I can find them. And that's basically how Tom and I met.
I'd like to back up for a minute, if you will, and maybe you could help us understand a little bit better what zero waste means.
Well, zero waste is a big picture thing. In my mind, it goes beyond what most people talk about when they talk about zero waste. And when most people talk about zero waste, they're talking about diverting any post-consumer products, what some people might call disposables, or some people might call trash, which are really just unrecovered resources. Zero waste means diverting all of those resources out of landfills and into their highest and best use possible. So a lot of people that talk about zero waste are focused on the solid waste side of things. I personally believe it should go beyond that and talk about water waste and hazardous waste, etc. But really, when people talk about zero waste and the way it's mostly used, it's about that. It's about diverting solid waste materials from landfills and to their highest and best purpose of use. And then you've got some people putting a twist on that use a zero waste to landfill, but they exclude things that they burn. And I'm personally opposed to that. And I think the group that sets the standards, ZWIA, the Zero Waste International Alliance, also has a definition of zero waste that excludes burning.
So who's working on zero waste? Is this a feasible goal? Are people really doing it? Are companies really doing it?
Absolutely. You know, a long time ago, people questioned it and said that it was crazy to even try to go to zero waste. Frankly, that's the same thing they said when California set a goal of going to 50% diversion. I started thinking about zero waste and got introduced to it after coming out of working in manufacturing environments. And when I heard people say you can't really reach zero on anything, that absolute zero is a near impossibility, I wondered why they didn't give that same argument when talking about zero accident programs or zero defect programs. And in those cases, it's really a journey. It's about striving for continuous improvement and continuing to do better. No matter where you're at now, you have to continue to try to do better. And in my opinion, that's what zero waste is really all about. You're always trying to do better. 90% isn't good enough. 98% isn't where somebody should stop. They should continuously be trying to improve. And that's what I think achieving zero waste is all about. And we do have companies now, such as Sierra Nevada Brewing, that are over 98%. And we've got cities that are really getting close to that goal, like San Francisco, for example. And there are some cities in Europe that are striving for zero waste goals right now. And I believe they're achievable. And whether or not the absolute zero is achievable, it's certainly worth the mission and worth trying to achieve.
Yeah, Sierra Nevada's story is very impressive, since it's a relatively, they call it a microbrew, by the way, but the plant itself in Chico is relatively large size, and I think they're actually above 99%, weren't they? Didn't they end up like 99.2%, something amazing like that? I believe their diversion is impressive. Did we lose Bob?
It's pretty high.
It's amazing. They compost on site. They actually grow hops right on the property next to the brewery.
Well, let's talk about them for a minute. Just what are the different streams that they're diverting? Let's use them for an example. I think it's fascinating.
Sure, I can tell you quite a few things that they're doing. One that I think is impressive is they're taking all of the byproduct from the production of beer and composting that right on site and using that to grow the crops that they then bring back inside to serve in their own restaurant on site. They've also got a herd of goats that they use, and they have a system inside where they're measuring their key performance indexes. And when you walk in every day, there's a monitor there that all the employees see, and it shows exactly where they are to the 10th of a percent every single day, with materials flowing into the building and materials flowing out of the building. And when we were there and I was talking with their director of sustainability, she pointed out places where it had gone from, say, 98.2 to 98.6 on 1 or 2 days. And she could pinpoint precisely the item that was brought in by one of their suppliers that caused that minor spike, and what they did to make sure that wouldn't happen again. And that's how on top of it they are. They also go, again, beyond just solid waste. They have one of the largest private solar installations in the country on top of their roof to power their plant. They also make biofuel out of the product that comes out of their facilities, and they fuel their own trucks with that. So they have their own processing station right there on site. So
if anybody knows Chico, Chico's very, very hot in the summer, and so the parking lot to their restaurant, which I believe is the largest restaurant in Chico, the parking lot is solar panels, is covered with solar panels. So you can park in the shade, you know, and at the same time, what's providing the shade is the solar panel.
Now, for the argument that we see, go ahead. I'm sorry, Bob.
And I was going to say they're not just doing it themselves. They're setting a really great leadership role in the Chico area. When we did the training up there, I think we had more than 60 businesses participate, many of them from Chico, who follow Sierra Nevada's lead in trying to achieve zero waste goals. So after Sierra Nevada became certified by the U.S. Zero Waste Business Council, there are now 4 or 5 other businesses in Chico that are pursuing certification due to their leadership.
Wonderful. Why do you think it was so important to them personally, the company?
Well, it's my understanding that it all started with the owner. Whenever he started the brewing company, he decided right away that they were going to try to do everything right. And so he didn't cut corners, and he tried to make sure that they followed a triple bottom line approach of being socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable in all of their activities. So as the business grew, that was an intrinsic part of the values from inside the company. And being a company that's owned by one individual, they have that kind of control to make those things happen. And it's my
his name's Ken. His name's Ken Grossman, and so his business is only 30 years old, and you wouldn't know it, right? You'd think it'd been around forever, but it's I think this is his 30th year in business this year.
Well, I think it's so important to tell this story because I wouldn't know that, and I think that if it's achievable, we need to spread the word that it's achievable. One of the arguments I hear in regards to zero waste or going green, if you will, is that it's going to cost more. Do you see that what they're doing as an effective model that potentially maybe it's actually giving them savings?
Absolutely. And we have numerous case studies through the U.S. Zero Waste Business Council that have been submitted by our members, including Toyota. And Tom does some great work over at Whole Foods, and I'm sure he could share some examples of cost savings. In a food environment, there are some natural opportunities. For example, right size ordering and making sure that you're doing just-in-time inventory so you reduce food spoilage, portion control, reusing products that are still servable but might not look as appealing out on a line or in a merchandising situation, but they'd be perfectly great in a stew. So there are a lot of opportunities right in the food service environment, for example, where achieving zero waste is also about zero wasting dollars and saving money. And another group that I previously served on the board of, they've since merged into something else, Conservation Value, was all about just showing how you can improve your bottom line by following a zero waste example. And any company that thinks they're saving money by not following a zero waste model is really just externalizing the cost, because they're putting products out into the market or disposing of products that then become somebody else's responsibility to clean up. Often taxpayers' dollars are used, and somebody else is just paying the price of the product that they're making all the profit from. And so as those types of models are corrected economically, I believe everybody will see that it's in their best interest to follow a zero waste plan. And even practically, it serves the bottom line more often than not when they start to pursue this and see the ways they can save money, even just in disposal costs and the amount of pickups that they have to do every week. They're not being charged as much by the hauler if they can get all, for example, say get all of their organics out of the landfill, which are generally the heaviest products that go in, and get those into a composting program instead. They're saving a lot of money just right there.
Correct. We want to switch topics now with Bob, because Bob's one of these many talents. You know a lot about a topic. We had a conversation, and it just turned out that you knew a lot about the topic of radio frequency ID chips. First of all, explain to the audience what an RFID chip is, and then sort of bring us through how you got to be so knowledgeable about it. Go ahead.
Sure. Radio frequency ID tags are most commonly found in things like key fobs, for example, that can open locks, or one of the products that people might be most familiar with are the toll passes that you put in your car. So when you drive under a toll booth, it'll signal and pay your toll for you, and you attach it to a credit card. And so that's what a lot of people would be familiar with. What they might not know is that these tags are embedded in products all over the world that they might have never considered. For example, the way I got involved initially was I was paying close attention to some programs being operated by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and they discovered that a clothing manufacturer had been embedding these tags in their sweaters for years and not telling people. And it's an issue from a consumer privacy standpoint, because these tags can be tracked and they often have a 20-year life. And so people could literally be tracked by the clothes that they're wearing. And these chips hold a lot of value for people like marketers and logistics experts, because, for example, Walmart was one of the first to mandate these tags on all their pallet-sized loads from all suppliers approximately 8 years ago. And then the military started doing it because they were losing products overseas and they couldn't track them well. And now they're starting to become cheaper, and they're being embedded in everything. They're less than a penny a tag now, and they're being produced by the millions. And so they offer some potential problems and potential benefits. For example, if you think about tracking models of where, we'll use the word waste, but really waste should be a verb, not a noun, because it only becomes waste when somebody wastes it. But with talking about tracking and wanting to know where things are coming from before they get to the landfill, you can put systems in place where they know where a tag has first been read. Say, for example, when a truck goes to pick up a bin, they could actually ID the tags in there and record that information. And then later, as a truck's passing through a landfill gate, those tags could be read again. And from a zero waste.
Explain this reader aspect. This is what I found fascinating. So, I mean, we're just sitting here. Is there something reading us right now? Is there something reading you while you sit there right now? Explain how, Because the chip is not a proactive chip, right? It just kind of sits there,
right?
waiting to be read.
There are two basic types of chips.
Go ahead.
There are active and passive chips. The vast majority are passive chips. And what that means is that they don't have their own source of power. They are actually powered by the signal that reads them. So that's why, for example, you might not need to replace batteries in the key fob that you use to open a door at, say, a mailbox store, or your pass for going through tolls. What happens is the radio signal hits the tag, and then when it creates a magnetism in the antenna, and that magnetism gives the short burst of power that's needed to send the data back to the reader from the tag. So it's really a reflective empowering from the radio signal.
Got it.
And that way the tags last a lot longer, and they don't have to be powered, and they can be made much smaller.
And you can put it in clothing, and it can be washed.
Right.
And the washing wouldn't
Typically
ruin
not. People who are trying to ruin them on purpose to make sure that they aren't tracked are doing things like microwaving them. And you'll also notice that as of, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, because of people being concerned about being tracked by their toll pass devices, now when you get a toll pass from Cal DOT, they send you a little bag that acts like a Faraday cage that you can keep it in anytime you're not using it to go through a toll booth. And an interesting way that they're using that for logistics now, so they can do live traffic reporting. So they know when a car passes through one booth, and when it passes through another booth, they know the amount of time it's taking traffic to pass between those two booths, and they can update traffic reports. Well, you can use that same type of technology to track any material that has one of those tags embedded. So if you're trying to track, and some people who were advocating for the privacy rights of consumers wanted to kill the tags right at the register. But the way I saw it is that these tags have a really valuable logistics purpose, that if we kill them at the register, we're allowing the manufacturers, the distributors, everybody else to gain that value, while the recyclers are simply left with the responsibility of cleaning them up. And it's going to be a very significant problem if they start to be embedded in things such as bottles of soft drinks or cans, individual packaging, and that's already starting to happen because of how inexpensive they're becoming. Then you get removal issues and contamination issues in the recycling process. So and there's difficulty removing them, and some contain toxins. So we really need to go back to the whole idea of designing properly from the beginning with this whole issue of the tags, and then thinking about ways that we can protect consumer privacy while still gaining the advantages that everybody else in the logistics chain is getting before the consumer purchases the products. So there are a lot of big questions to tackle, a lot of big opportunities.
How big are these tags? Or how small are they? Maybe is
they're generally pretty tiny. They can be the size of like a thumbnail or a pinky nail, and sometimes you'll see them. They're attached to like an adhesive patch. It looks like a small square Band-Aid with a little antenna that goes in a square around the inside. So they can be. The chip itself is very tiny. It's the antenna that takes up the space, and that doesn't take up much space at all. They're pretty flat, and their technology is getting better all the time, so they're continuing to get smaller.
Fascinating. Well, I see that it could be definitely a polarizing topic because, one, it's great for logistics, but two, we don't want to start embedding more toxins into our plastic that we need to be recycling.
The difficulty of recycling, it's an additional thing that is not the material. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you go to recycle material, you don't want to, the chip should be not reintegratable, I don't think, right? Or anyway, I don't understand the science as well as you do, Bob, but it seems to me that we would not want it as part of a can. But you just mentioned that.
And part of the problem is the specific metallurgy of the antennas. If you make them out of copper, which a lot of people were, they, for example, contaminate the metallurgy process if you try to recycle them. If you make them out of aluminum, they don't cause as much of a problem. So if we can get everybody just doing little steps like that, it makes a big difference. There was a study done by the Steel Recycling Institute who confirmed that situation, and there was also a study done by paper manufacturers showing that it will mess up the paper recycling process if, for example, they're put on newspapers. And they're already being put on numerous cardboard boxes. So almost any type of software or high-priced item that you buy in a store these days, if you open up a box, you'll find a tag in there somewhere. And that's because they want to track it.
I actually, I've seen a lot of them, and thank you for clarifying. I didn't really know what they were used for, so thank you so much for educating us on not just this fascinating zero waste story, but also this emerging technology.
Thanks again, Bob. This is chapter 1 of Bob Hollis.
Yeah, we'd love to revisit with you and see your beautiful scenery sometime soon, if that's okay with you. Get an update on this tracking.
Wonderful. That'd be great.
Well, thank you for your time today. We look forward to revisiting with you, and yeah, fascinating.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bob Hollis. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.